Welcome to Negotiation with Alice, your negotiation podcast. Everything that you do where you need to get on the same page with someone else is a negotiation. So whether you have to negotiate a contract with someone, or you simply need your boss to sign off on that program that you'd like to implement, or you want to figure out how to rebalance the chore structure in your home, or talk about what vacation you want to go on. All of these things are negotiations. So in my podcast, we go over both personal and professional conversations, which all are considered negotiation, and I will give you tips on how to come out ahead. Welcome to the show. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Negotiation with Alice. Today, I've got Ruth Klein with me today. Hello, Ruth.
Hello. So nice to be here.
Yes, I'm very excited to have our conversation today. I'd love for you to introduce yourself, what it is that you do, where you are, so my listeners can get to know you a little bit.
All right. Well, I live in Pacific Palisades, and I'm a TV host. I'm a 7 times bestselling author. I work with entrepreneurs who want a high level of visibility. So I'm excited. We're putting together our October event where I'm going to help people with their pitches and then help introduce them to literary agents and publishers, and they'll be able to pitch directly to them. So that's exciting. And then my TV show is the book club with Ruth Klein. And I mean to tell you, Alice, I am having so much fun interviewing these incredible entrepreneurial authors, visionaries. It's just been really, really fun. And I'm glad I'm here now.
That's great. Yeah, so we'll have to talk offline more. I've got a book coming out, so we'll definitely chat about that.
Yes, for sure.
So I would love to talk a little bit, Ruth, about, you talk a little bit about negotiating for your limitations. And I'd love to introduce this concept. If you can share with my audience, what does that mean when you're negotiating for your limitations? What is that?
Yes. So I think we all do it to some extent when you hear yourself say, I can't do that, or you think to yourself, who do I think I am that I'm going to want to write a book? And even if I do write a book, who's going to even read it? And why would I want to write a book? Because what do I have to say that nobody has already said? And so you're negotiating with your limitations. Now, why is that so important? Because in my opinion, and when I work with my clients, until you can get past those limitations, see them for what they are. And here's the deal. When this happens, this is a good thing. It's a good thing. It's like taps us on the shoulder and we go, there's still an area here that I can work on to make my life and my business a lot more harmonious. So it's a good thing when you find that. However, if you're finding that you're having difficulty in negotiations, I don't care what it is, with clients, whether maybe they want their money back, and you have a strict rule that you know that you give so much up front, and for whatever reason, how do you negotiate that? Or you just say, phooey, that's it. There's some customer service involved there too. So, it's not a clean break unless you've been very, very clear in terms of what you can and can't do. So these are issues that I find, HOAs, for example. HOAs are notorious for the owners of the condominiums and the board. And so many times they have differing feelings here. And I've been involved in things like that. So you have to take the personality out of the equation, because that's what can kill a negotiation. And then it immediately puts the other person on guard. It's like, so there's no hope of negotiation.
So let me make sure that I'm understanding. So what you're saying is that, like, the best that I can negotiate is as far as my personal growth work has taken me. Meaning, if I only believe that I am worthy of X, I will have trouble negotiating beyond X until
You
I do
really
more
you
personal work.
really will. You really will. I was in a room yesterday with probably 8, maybe 10 people. And the main person, just all he heard was attacks. That's all he heard. And he went immediately into trying to preserve his ego. And this particular person, if he worked on more personal development and he could see that differences are healthy, let's look at what we do share in common. This I've had conversations with different political parties, and we know with politics, especially now, it can get very heated. So rather than look at the personalities, rather than look at the differences, at the end of the day, when does someone say, what do you want? What is, at the end of the day, what do you want? How do you envision it? And then you ask the other person, and I'm telling you, Alice, 8 times out of 10, they want the same thing. But the way they go about it, the way they handle it, all part of their own growth is how they're going to handle it and what's going to happen. So I can rarely talk on politics, but when I can, it's so delightful. It's so delightful because we have different views, but we want the same thing. So we focus on that and then we try, okay, how can we solve that?
That's fantastic. So a lot of what you're saying is like the interest versus the positions, right? That
Yeah,
positions are what people show up and they argue all day long and they
yeah,
never get to an agreement. Whereas if they actually listen to like your heart and what
yes,
it is that you need and your deepest interest, that you can actually find common
yes,
ground.
absolutely. And I love that. I love how cleanly you put that. Real listening, and there's positioning. So the real, they many times are at odds with each other. And that's how attorneys make a lot of money, because the further they are, the bigger the expense, the longer it's going to take. But the bottom line, the hardship on the person going through it, not only financially, but emotionally. And I often wonder, I'd love to do this as a social experiment, is when there are differences in negotiation, and I start to hear the personal interests and someone's not listening and they're taking it personally, to stop the negotiation. Stop. And then have it a heart-centered intervention with both people independently, then together, and now let's see where we are. I
And what does that
really,
look like?
yeah,
The heart-centered intervention, can you describe in your mind what that is like?
yeah. So, as I mentioned, I was in a heated discussion, uh, trying to negotiate things with this group, and what that would look like, I would say, stop. We're not getting anywhere. Let's take a step back, and I would talk to the person taking it personally and see if I could find an inroad into his heart where he could understand it's not personal, where he could stop to listen. And I would ask him, what do you want? What's the vision? What do you want? And he'd probably go immediately to, well, they don't listen, they don't appreciate. Stop. I do this with couples all the time. So, because the husband wants to blame the wife wants to blame the husband. So, and then I would go to the other group, the 8 people, and say, "What's your vision here?" Let's not look at the personality, because they were looking at the personality too, and that's what happens. And so I would give them, I do soul centered coaching. I would give them some ideas that would be more heart centered and be able to listen, to truly listen with their heart instead of their ego. I think that's the biggest difference. How can you listen with your heart and not your ego? And I do this with my clients all the time, and I that's how they get past their limitations, because we too much we get triggered with our ego. And here's the deal: the ego gets a bump rap, because there's two parts of the ego, right? There's the ego that wants us to have children, the part of us that wants to have a nice, comfortable home, a nice, harmonious family, all of that. And then there's the other side of the ego that we only talk about. And that's the ego that tries to protect us, but in the process of protecting us, limits us.
That is really interesting. So, I want to dive a little bit deeper into this whole like personality versus the issue. You touched upon it a little bit right now. But so in the middle of a negotiation, I understand that, if you do personal work, you're going to be able to negotiate for more because you understand and believe that you deserve more. But in the moment when people are having negotiations, right, and they're butting up against their own limitations, what can you advise for people who are butting up against their limitations and they're in the midst of a negotiation? Obviously, it's too late to go do personal work because they're in it.
Right.
How can you help them?
Okay, so they're in it. And if they can, when you have negotiations, there's usually, well, it's the first one time, or then let's get back together and renegotiate. And then let's get back and renegotiate. Somewhere between negotiation number one and negotiation number two, this seems simple. It's simple, but not necessarily easy. So what I would suggest is you journal. What is it you want? Because, so many times, and I'm going to use the legal because it's such a perfect example. Boy, I'm going to get them and I'm going to take them for everything they're worth. That's purely ego. That's purely personality. What is it you truly want? You're upset right now. Negotiations don't come out well when people come in upset. And the upset comes from our egos being triggered. He did me wrong. She did me wrong. Right off the bat, they're going to negotiate for their limitations because they're not going to see the possibility of getting what they want in a way that doesn't limit them. And so you journal. You literally journal. Here's some questions. Here's some prompts. And you put this in chat as well. What is it I truly want at the end of this? If I'm angry, am I angry? And if I am angry, why am I angry? How can this negotiation have an outcome where I'm somewhat happy and the other person is somewhat happy? That is the negotiation. Right. And then, Chad or Claude will ask you other questions. And then you're going to start to see it's acting like a little therapist. But at the end of the day, what do you truly want out of it? Take away the triggers, take away the ego, take away the anger. What is it that you want?
No, that's excellent.
And here's the other part. Here's another part. What will you be happy with? What will you be happy with at the end of the negotiation?
And depending on what the people are negotiating, right, whether it's a sales thing or some kind of contract, for me, a lot of my clients are negotiating a divorce. And so while they might be negotiating money, I always ask people, what do you want emotionally? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because sometimes that is the most valuable piece of the negotiation.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's brilliant. Alice. There was a family attorney, the ones that, and he said, Ruth, I love your soul-centered coaching. Can you work with my couples to your point, can you work with my couples so they're not so aggressive towards each other? Because especially they're dealing with children. And so a lot of times children, unfortunately, are the pawns. Parents don't mean to do that, but they're so angry for different reasons. Um, and I'm gonna digress here for a moment because I think it's very important, Alice. We get so upset during a divorce for different reasons, but one big one is that abandonment issue. If we've grown up with any type of abandonment, that's going to play out in relationships, friends, love situations. And so when someone leaves, especially the person that starts the divorce, the other person's going to feel incredibly abandoned. And then if there's any other underlying issue, like, I'm not pretty enough, even before this, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, all the enoughs. So did you see how that starts to compound the anger and the trigger of the ego? So now we're getting so upset. We're using potentially children as pawns. We're spending a lot of money with attorneys because we're so angry. And I love attorneys. I think they do great jobs, but we've got to be able to not, again, negotiate for our limitations. We're negotiating for our limitations.
It's interesting when you talk about, I know we're both slightly digressing, but you're talking about the divorce, and that's sort of my realm. And what's interesting is when you said, hey, they don't necessarily mean to use them as pawns, but they are. And so I think what happens is the framing of it for each parent is, oh, well, this is what's best for my child, but it's coming from a place of hurt, right? They're feeling hurt. And so then they frame whatever it is that is in the best interest of their child is coming from a position of they're feeling hurt. So they want to try to fix that hurt. And they
Absolutely.
use the child to try to fix it.
They want to fix the hurt for themselves and hurt the other person. And it's understandable. It's understandable. But I've learned a long, long time ago that I'm not going to give anyone rent in my emotional heart. They can't pick up real estate there. And so the hurt's a big one. It's a big one. And it is hurtful. 1000% hurtful. And this is an opportunity again. Journal. Where's the hurt really coming from? Because when there's a divorce, very rarely does it come from outer space. It usually takes a while, and quite honestly, both people know it needs to be worked on. Most likely years earlier. And maybe they did work on it, maybe they didn't work on it, maybe they worked on themselves, maybe they didn't work. That is what it is. So so that's why, where is that hurt coming from really? And once we can identify those soulful places, those heart places, then we go, wow, this relationship just played out beautifully in the trauma that I experienced when I was younger. I didn't even see that until now. And it's going to stop now. And chances are, a wise thing would be to get help. Someone who you could they would help you process it. They would be a witness to your hurt, to your anger, to all of that. And then as life has different seasons, it's time when you're ready to move forward.
No, that's very beautiful. The other thing too is that I think about how when people are thinking about the best interest of the child, the way to be able to reverse engineer what it is that they want, what is the best interest of the child. I always like to say, the best outcomes for your child is how the parents get along,
That's right.
right? If the
That's
parents are embroiled in conflict constantly, whether even if they're fighting for what each of them think is the best interest of the child, it's not going to serve them. So if you want to reverse engineer your child's happiness, to think about, okay, we need to somehow get along because that is going to actually make them the happiest children. And so then you reverse engineer that back into what you were just talking about, which is journaling and trying to figure out where the hurt is coming from and trying to get healing so that you can get along with your co-parent, right?
Yeah. I mean, I experienced it myself. I did not anticipate a divorce. Nobody anticipates a divorce when they first get married. And I was married for quite a long time, and it wasn't working, and I knew it, but I stayed in. We women tend to stay in longer than necessary. And for different reasons, there was a divorce, and I was very angry. And then I remember one day I was talking to him, and I laughed at something he said, and I thought, wow, wow. But I was doing a lot of personal development. I was looking at me. I was looking at behaviors before, during, after, and when I was younger. And in fact, I was in a program. I was in a master's program in spiritual psychology, and that was off the charts. And I don't, that really made a difference, and that's why I utilize spiritual psychology and clinical psychology with the work that I do. It can be done, and now we're very good friends. And when we have events, we're all together. And my children, it's a safety feeling. And quite honestly, it's healthy for me. It's healthy for him. It's healthy for the kids. To your point. To your point. So, I mean, I could go a lot of that on that. But yes, you're absolutely right. And I love Alice, how you're a very good negotiator. And the way I know that is because you're a phenomenal listener. You're a phenomenal listener. I feel heard by you. And number one. Number two, I know you're an excellent negotiator because you summarize for clarification what I just said, and then utilize your words, your thoughts, and tie it in a nice bow. I really appreciate that. I think everyone on that listens to this podcast really needs to work with you in some way because you help people feel heard.
Thank you, Ruth. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So, Ruth, I would love to share how people can get in touch with you if they feel like they would like to work with you. And can you share with us how to find you?
Yes, I would love that. So I love to talk to people first. It might be a fit to work together, it may not. And if not, then I will suggest someone else, although I would love to work with them. So I'm going to give you my calendar. It's www.ruthklein.com. That's my website, /calendar. And if someone is an author and wants to be on my TV show, The Book Club with Ruth Klein, if someone is looking for some soul-centered coaching to help them go through some of the things we were talking about, and if also, I have a book tour coming out in the fall. The book came out actually in 2020, the same month that Governor Newsom closed down California. And so it was what I call a sleeper, as was The Artist's Way. The book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, that was a sleeper also. It came out in 1992. It was years and years and years until people really read it and it became very popular. So I'm looking at my little Generation Why Not book as a sleeper, and I'm awakening it for the fall. So let me know where you live. I'm going to be in Nashville. I've never been there. New York, Washington, D.C., Denver. I live in the LA area. So let me know. Love to come by and say hi.
That is exciting, Ruth. Thank you so much for sharing and good luck with the book tour. That's
Thank
really
you.
awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. This was
Thanks.
great.
Thank you for being with us today, Ruth. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of Negotiation with Alice. Until next time.